I don't know if you saw that interview Bono did with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, the one you
Yeah,
sent
I
me.
sent you some of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, like the clip which everyone played on social media was like the one segment of like a 2 minute disagreement, but pseudo disagreement, sort of kind of disagreement between Joe Rogan and
Oh,
Bono on whether Elon Musk had killed lots of people by his cuts. And so,
ooh.
but yeah, going back to my point in terms of
No, before you go back to the point, I
yeah,
didn't see that clip. Tell me more about that clip. Like,
well, Bono was basically just saying lots of people have died directly because of Elon Musk's cuts, and
I
like
think that's.
there's all this food which has just gone to waste because the people who had access, the keys to the shipping containers or whatever they were stored in, they got fired, and so and like this is almost certainly true. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a winner for Bono's argument, but like in terms of it's not necessarily true that specific example,
Mm,
but when you do massive cuts, you kill people. Any big government decision kills people. Anyone, even very small things, because you got the butterfly. Is it the butterfly effect? When you change
mm,
something small, it will end up killing different people. It's like the cart problem in philosophy. You've got the mining cart heading towards three people. Do you change it to the track which only kills
mm.
one person?
The trolley problem.
Yeah, the trolley problem. So most people, if they just have to pull the lever, it will go to they'll pull it to just kill the one person, even though they struggle with that. Um, and the same is true in government. You
Mm.
basically have to be a bit like very logical about it, not too emotional, for better or worse, because you will end up killing people. Your decisions, directly or indirectly, will kill people.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, this
they
was a.
might save more people in the long run or make more people healthier in the long run, but you will end up killing people if you're making big decisions.
The government effectively killing people was the subject of conversation here in the UK with the winter fuel allowance for elderly people here in the UK. The same
Mm.
argument was put there back then that they're effectively killing off the elderly who are not able to heat their homes now, being left in the cold, then getting pneumonia, then getting hospital and then dying. Effectively.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but that's impossible to.
there's one philosopher which would I forget his name, but he would use the term moral squeamishness, and he was a utilitarian, so take that with a pinch of salt. So he would think that the greatest good for the greatest number is the most ethical thing, even if that involves, like some people suffering. So,
As long as you're
uh,
not on the people who are in the suffering side, I suppose.
yeah, well,
For most people, I think.
yeah, I think a lot of people have.
I think the answer for most people would change whether they were in the group of the people that would suffer, or whether in practice they would be in the group of the people that wouldn't suffer.
Yeah, in practice, yeah, most people probably would be like that. But philosophers try and think of themselves as not real human beings, robots,
Yeah.
which has merits and has downsides as well. But yeah, he would call it. I forget his name. He called it moral squeamishness in terms of yeah, if you are afraid of killing someone to stop a big riot, like for instance, you got a big riot outside your you're a politician. You got a big group of people about to riot, and you don't know who did the crime that they're rioting about, but you have a suspect who you kind of think may have done it. You could be corrupt and not give him a proper trial and get that person killed. So you stop the riot, which you know will historically riots in your country have killed lots of people. So you know that this one's likely to kill lots of people unless you act now. So you can't you can't have a proper trial and whatever. So you have to take this person and make him
An example.
grant him guilty,
Mm.
and the crowd will be happy in this theoretical example. Um, yeah, it's a tricky problem in philosophy. Like, obviously, a lot of people will probably not be happy with that. They'll say that's completely corrupt. So that's we can't have that. But if you think in terms of saving lives, then it would be the right decision.
Mm. Yeah, but even in this kind of scenario, that completely disregards that this person has friends, has family, has relatives, has people that they know and they know him, and
Yeah,
and the
you don't have,
damage to that one person could have been the pillar of their community, the person who was keeping up the local orphanage running or something, like, and he
yeah,
was.
I think a lot of utilitarianism works on treating everyone as equal, and that
Mm,
so every one of the people in the riot who might have died, that say that was 100 people rather than one, there's a greater chance that one of those 100 people was the pillar of a community or had and they probably all had lots of friends and family, or just as likely to have a good decent amount of friends and family who would be upset by them dying. So utilitarianism accepts a degree of
Mm.
not knowing perfect information in order to act, because you never know perfectly
Yeah, but still,
until maybe AI comes along, and you'll find your brother's being killed for some unknown reason, but you'll be told by the AI, oh, it was because a lot of people would have died otherwise.
oh, that don't get me started on that. That's a Minority Report scenario right there.
Yeah.
Like of, which actually reminds me what I was reading earlier on Reddit about this controversial AI tool that the police will be able to use that will effectively look at people's sex lives and beliefs. It will effectively profile people
Right. How would it do that?
based on their online presence.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's yeah.
And and, and,
A
and,
lot
and,
of
and,
people
any,
don't.
and any other intelligence that the police has on them in their own database. Apparently, I was reading a little bit about the article. Like I didn't read it all, so don't come at me. I was just reading some of it, and it was Palantir actually,
Oh, really?
this US company, technology like data analytics and technology company, was working with companies in the UK to kind of launch this AI tool that will be able to effectively compile like some kind of database of people and profile them based on the police information, investigations that they've done, all in one to effectively create these people profiles.
Yeah,
So,
I think a lot of people think of Trump and whatever as being like the defenders of individual rights and liberalism, but actually, like, because Trump even spoke of a liberal conference before he became president, and a lot of people think, yeah, the previous government was trying to take rights away from them, but Trump government seems to be in bed with Palantir, who Peter
mm,
Thiel. I do quite like some of the stuff he says. I read his book a long time ago when I was interested in entrepreneurship, but his company Palantir is, like, I'm sure it has lots of uses, but it also has a great danger in terms of what it can do in terms of using data to manage and control a population. Um, and yeah, it's interesting that Trump is in bed with that. It seems to some extent. I think Palantir's already got some new contracts or whatever with the government, and yeah, I think if I was a MAGA Republican, I'd be very upset about that.
yeah, and I mean, the people that were using, if we think about Lord of the Rings and where Palantir comes from as a name,
Is it the eye?
it was the sphere that Saruman had that communicated with Sauron. So
Oh, right. Okay.
they
Yeah.
were getting corrupted by the Palantirs. Whoever touched the Palantir became corrupted. So
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know if that is a pun intended situation. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they're like psychopaths, and they actually want to have their crime in full sight for anyone clever enough to decipher it. Like, yeah, maybe they, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, I guess yeah, like Palantir doesn't mean like you got a ball which you can look into and know anything.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, they were meant to be used for like in the Lord of the Rings. It was effectively communication and observation through it, but later on, effectively, whoever touched it would be effectively corrupted by Sauron. So I don't know if that is what's to come with
Mm.
companies like Palantir. Then that they'll
Certainly could be what's to come.
watch us and then assume control. This is what.
Yeah, and it's interesting they named it, and they probably. Oh, I guess they were probably more than likely aware of Lord of the Rings. A lot of these tech guys name stuff after the Lord of the Rings, like a lot of cryptocurrencies are named after Lord of the Rings characters. But anyway, yeah, so they knew the context of this in terms of how
And
that sort of thing can go wrong. That power corrupts, and the power to see things, which, yeah, like all seeing,
and
all seeing.
yeah, and going a step back again to the Trump government. Another nail in the coffin, I would say, for them is that a lot of people who have been talking about persecutions, about people that have been responsible for things. like draining the swamp and all that, and whoever's been, they were saying there was all these wastage and all these, illegal deals, all this money under the table, all of these, wastage in the government, and contracts that weren't real and all that. All right, who are the people that were doing all these things? Why aren't they prosecuted? Why aren't they? Why is no one like been taken to court? What is happening?
Yeah, yeah, it
Like,
is interesting. Like, why are they
if it's
prosecuted?
such a smoking gun, I mean, that like only one side was playing this game, why haven't they put all the people from that side in jail? I'm just saying,
Yeah,
what?
I guess in some scenarios it's probably hard to track exactly who was behind it, but yeah, like certainly there must be some cases, and I think there was one that I read about, but I could be mistaken.
I
But
haven't read about
Same with
anything.
same with Epstein as well. Like,
Yeah, but and the Epstein list and all that,
yeah, like surely there's more information that has not been released, or even if it's not going to be released, it could
it's never
help
gonna be released.
support a trial against some of his co-conspirators.
No one is gonna get caught. I think if the conspiracy ran as deep as it seems to be, without wanting to be very like super conspiratorial and tinfoil hat here, it seems to me that the Epstein case seems that it was going up to the highest levels of like governments and millionaires and billionaires and inter- and international like players being involved. So
Yeah, a lot of people think he was sort of like a Mossad asset, so
that
a proxy for the Israel government.
that's what I'm saying. So if there is so much involvement by so many people, I doubt any real evidence will ever see the light of day in this sort of case, like, and in many other cases as well. But I'm just saying that if they had all this like corruption in the government as they're saying they had, where is the heads? You know?
Yeah, well, there is the obvious theory which Elon Musk's poured gasoline on, but Donald Trump is heavily implicated in that, which some people also say a very good counterpoint in terms of the Democrats threw everything at him, and they could have thrown
That's a
less
good
at
point
him,
as
and
well.
they didn't. So I'm not convinced by that. But it is interesting. Yeah, Donald Trump
Though,
definitely did have those sort of tendencies. If you look at his recorded remarks, like the one which came out just before his first election,
yeah,
grab them by the
yeah,
you fill in the gap,
yeah,
and then him, yeah, like chatting with Jeffrey Epstein, and I think he's been they lip read it to, yeah, he was definitely like it was definitely locker room talk, if you want to put it that way.
mm,
And yeah, it is interesting that a lot of these MAGA guys who voters who are repulsed by all this stuff and want to drain the swamp or whatever.
the swamp isn't
Trump
getting.
is like proven to be to an extent on the line towards people like Epstein and, yeah, people who are in the not just yeah, people in the swamp effectively in terms of
Mm,
power, money, and corruption. Like, I believe, I haven't looked into it, but Trump University was kind of a scam. Um, yeah, so
mm,
it is interesting. He managed to convince so many people to vote, but I guess that also is testament to how corrupt the other side was, and
mm,
how bad the other side was in terms of just being incompetent. And I can't see anyone changing that for the Democrats at the moment.
mm. No, I don't think that will change anytime
Like
soon.
Gavin Newsom is he comes across the best, but he's got a relatively bad track record. At least it can be shown to. It can be marketed by his opponents as a really bad track record in as governor of California, and his management of the riots, like, and
Mm,
using that as a political tool, perhaps just as Trump has done, but he has as well, Gavin Newsom. Yeah, he's made it a political football, and I don't think, yeah, that's something which will reflect well on him come the next election. He might win some votes from that, but I don't, I don't think he'd win.
mm. Well, there's even talks about Trump running a third term, I think, isn't there?
Yes, well, I'm not so much in the camp of Trump's an authoritarian dictator, the second Hitler.
No, I think that is.
I'm in the camp that he might be. but I I can't really predict what Trump will do. I think Trump, and with the same with the tariffs thing, like a lot of economists will say, "Oh, how stupid is Trump? He's using tariffs."
Mm.
Yes and no. Yes, tariffs do seem to be bad for pretty much everyone concerned, but is he using them as a negotiating tactic? Yes and no. Is the pros going to outweigh the cons? We don't know. So you really and the right wing and the left wing and which is a lot of people in the United States and the world watching Trump will have their own opinions based on their narrative.
Mm.
And I think if you're an investor, which is to say if you are really betting on what's going to happen, putting your money where your mouth is, using reason, then yeah, you shouldn't sell all your stocks because you think they are going to tariffs are going to cause a problem. You have to wait and see with Donald Trump. Yeah,
Mm.
I think you can't treat everything he does as evil or incompetent or the best thing ever. You have
Mm.
to wait and see, and because he speaks a lot of words, and if you're a trader
Mm.
or if you're emotional, let's say if you're just someone who's emotional and
Mm.
responding to news articles, then you'll get swayed by that stuff. But if but what he says is kind of irrelevant. It's not, but because it hurts people in some ways. But in terms of long term consequences and predicting what will happen, you can't just go on what he said.
Mm. I think for most things these days, both sides are right to a degree, because it's almost like that meme. I don't know if you've seen the meme. It's almost like I've seen it. It's almost like a sketch. I've seen it in a variation of ways where there is two people, and there's a number in the sand. They're both standing on one side, and then there's a number in the sand, and the number is 9 for one person, but 6 for the other, effectively.
Okay.
So, or something along these lines.
Mm.
Just because they're seeing it from a different perspective, it's almost
Yeah.
like, they're seeing it from their perspective. They're right.
Yeah,
So,
and if you spend enough time in different echo chambers online of the left and the right, which most people will be too repulsed by the other side to even contemplate doing, or if they do that, they just will struggle to um, let their conditioning go temporarily to be able to see how other people see it. Um, yeah, like if you really generally do that, you do see that both people have good arguments on their side, and both sides, which is not moral relativism. There's just I don't know how to explain it, but I'm not a moral relativist, and I've been in echo chambers on either
mhm.
side, and I'm convinced by the arguments of each echo chamber, which is like, oh, how does that work? But I think to be honest about that, rather than not deny it, is perhaps the first step. Um, yeah, I don't know what to make of it though.
I think a lot of people are even penalized these days for, and are being told off for saying, "Oh, I don't know." That's the problem as well, though. Like,
Yeah,
we don't let people say, "I don't know." People say, "Oh, you should know better. You should have already
yeah,
learned
yeah.
everything that there is
Had
to learn about every topic." Like, no one
yeah,
can do that, and we don't let people be wrong. Like, we are ready to cancel them and, like, throw them under the bus just because they were wrong on something, or because they weren't informed enough. And it's
yeah.
like,
I'm pretty much no one is informed enough, and even at the university level, you'll get people doing similar debates on either side. Um, Arguably, universities are skewed a little bit towards the left, but I think if you were, you could theoretically have a really good like right wing economists,
mm,
say against really good left wing economists. For instance, yeah, current economists arguing against economists from 50 years ago. That would be a way to get left wing and right wing arguing against each other. And yeah, they both have really good arguments. So it's not so much about what expertise you have. That's not to say you shouldn't try and educate yourself. But yeah, it's more complicated than that.
mm. And I don't think people put themselves enough on the opposition side to try and argue against themselves, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, Charlie Munger, the famous investor, Warren Buffett's business partner, uh, who some people see as even wiser than Warren Buffett, he said, yeah, one of the best things you can do, one of his bits of advice was to be able to argue the opponent's argument
Mm.
better than you can argue your own argument. And like, how many of us can truly say that is the case?
No, in most cases we can't really. We just, um, especially these days where people just get sound bites from here and there of
Yeah,
different like ideological positions that they hear in a little clip here, 30 seconds here, 10 seconds
yeah,
there, and then that these 10-second clips, 3 10-second clips have formed someone's opinion on a huge topic that is super nuanced with a lot of gray and a lot of, um, strong opinions on both sides. And it's like, uh,
yeah.
uh,
And yeah, as I said, I don't agree with moral relativism, but I would say maybe it's helpful for us to think that there most likely is a very compelling argument for the opposite side, that whatever debate that you come down on one side of. Like, if you frame it in that way, to say that there most likely is a compelling argument for the opposite side, then you're inclined to actually open up your mind to it and your heart to it, and be able to actually maybe incorporate that argument, and maybe you'll still be convinced by your current present your original argument, but it would have been worth doing because there is a truth or an aspect to that truth, which you hadn't considered if you are closed minded about it.
mm. Do you think you said you're not you don't believe in moral relativism, right? Um,
I don't think I do. Yeah, like obviously people that use that as a term to insult people. Oh, he's a moral relativist. Like, he doesn't really believe anything's right or wrong. Um, I would say my perhaps my point comes from believing that there is perennial philosophical principles which, and you could say equally, some people would say this is God,
mm,
effectively. There are moral principles which transcend space and time, in the fact that they, in any space, in any culture, in any time, certain principles seem to organize society in a way which is more like heaven
mm,
and less like hell. And
mm,
not to say heaven or hell are real places, I have no idea, but to use analogies of heaven and hell, and you could create a society which is closer to paradise, or one which is the antithesis to paradise. Um, so yeah, I would say I'm not a
but
moral relativist in
but
the fact that I believe there is a better way of organizing society, although I'm not exactly sure
mm,
always exactly what the way to go about that is.
but you can say a lot of people over different cultures and different times have organized in a similar way to move towards, as you said, a paradise version of society. But you could argue that that just makes us all very similar to each other, and our nature is just very similar, in the sense of that we all have this innate, um, moral compass in us that doesn't necessarily come from God.
It might be instincts, but if those instincts work, then they're grounded in something which is true, in terms of they work, in terms of they map onto reality in a way which is creates positive results. And so I would say, yeah, like these principles are
Yeah, and
transcended in that.
evolution. Yeah.
Yes, like imagine a planet can evolve life, advanced life, completely different than us, a million light years away, and if we were to guess at what their moral principles were, or what they valued as virtues, I would say courage would be more than likely to be included there.
Mm,
Compassion would be
mm,
more than likely to be included there, slash with empathy,
mm,
and several other things. And in terms of also, yeah, the importance of making decisions calmly.
mm,
I think these things improve a culture generally, and allow it to become an advanced civilization, whatever that means. Um,
Mm.
and so that would be my argument, that these principles transcend space and time, not in some sort of necessarily religious sense, but just in a practical sense of how the universe is mapped out.
For sure, because I would say that you could see communities as you could even map natural selection, I think, to communities. And all the things that you've described are advantageous to the survival of a community. Therefore, there would be selected traits to exist in the community.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Jordan Peterson had a debate with Alex O'Connor and Richard Dawkins several months ago, and I think he talked about this in terms of, yeah, we can see this as like God, or we
Mm.
can see it as like evolution
Mm.
slash really practical stuff, nothing God to do with it. But he doesn't see that division so much.
Mm.
Like perhaps there's something in his way of thinking that how most of us are trained to think in the Western world is yeah, it's not the case. Like, yeah, like I don't know, you could use the phrase God is real in terms of not giving God a priority over real, but actually saying God is real. So God
Mm.
is reality. Um, how reality is. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being clever about that, but I think maybe something in there.
Mm. Yeah, I can see why Richard Dawkins would not be convinced so much about that, because we also have evidence to show that obviously before Homo sapiens there were other human species that have come and they didn't fare as well as we did. Some of the reasons why they suspect they didn't fare as well as we did is because of reasons such as social cohesion and aggression and among other reasons. So far from the fact that whether they believed in a god or not, I think, or in a higher order of things.
Yeah, well, it is interesting in nearly all cultures who are successful, or nearly all cultures, I'd say, that exist still, believe in something synonymous to God. But also, yeah, like I could go along with your way of thinking in terms of it's just evolution that's made things the way they are. But I would also say, yeah, like the way things have turned out can, like, obviously society is not perfect, but in some ways, like we can live individual lives which have some amazing moments in them, which seem to be almost divine, transcendent, sacred, not in an otherworldly sense, but just in terms of appreciation. I would use the word, like if we really are not distracted by everything, and we sometimes in our life have moments which we just feel incredibly lucky to be experiencing. And it's very hard to make an argument about it, but it's interesting
Hmm.
that that's the case. Like if it's because often we argue, oh, that's just evolution, maybe, but
Hmm.
it's also created this possibility for wonder or love and yeah, just joy, gratitude, appreciation.
Hmm.
So yeah, like
And
maybe evolution has created God, or maybe God creates evolution, or maybe it's none of those things. But
hmm.
I'm just saying,
No,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, of course.
can't just accept Richard Dawkins' um, proclamation, because it often comes up with a baggage that it degrades the. I don't really want to use the word sanctity because that's
Hmm.
another overly religious word, but the sanctity of existence.
Yeah, I can see what you mean, and I mainly put the argument forward of natural selection just so that we have like a balanced kind of discussion on it more than anything. I wouldn't say like even as a personal opinion, I would like to think that maybe there is a higher order of things as we kind of describe that maybe as Jordan Peterson says, God is at the top and everything else stems from that, whatever that is.
Maybe, but I would also. I'm gonna do devil's advocate as well. Now you said that, and I don't know if this is true. Who knows? God knows, I guess, if God exists. But I don't like. Part of me is does not like the idea of higher realities or different levels of reality or God on top or whatever. Maybe that maps onto some way of thinking, but I think maybe it's more useful or more real to think of in terms of God is not necessarily higher, but he's the thing that God people describe when they say God is actually like the vertical realm in
Mm,
terms of imagine on the graph vertically, and that just means in the way I'm describing it, it means not stretching off horizontally into the past or future. And once we let that go, we come to a state of sometimes peace, and from that state you can invite in things such as joy sometimes, and compassion and all that stuff. So it's we say vertical or it's a higher state realm, but actually that's just a way of speaking which describes or analogizes the collapse of the stretching into the past and future, which takes us away from the present moment and takes away from. So I heard something interesting earlier
mhm,
today. I was actually at my school and they were listening to a meditation on joy, and it was saying, drop the idea that of a sentence, I will be happy when X happens.
mm,
And so X is, when maybe our sins will be forgiven in the past, or when in the future, whether we'll get love or whatever from someone else. So let that condition go, the condition for happiness, which is conditioning itself, perhaps.
mm.
Um, let conditioning go, and then you come back into what is the present moment, but not in terms of trying to be present, but in terms of realizing what is distracting you.
Oh, I can definitely see that because there is always going to be another X. Is that is the catch?
Mm.
That X will always be
It's like
substituted for
it's
another
analogous
X.
to thinking that we're nearly through our jobs list. Like if you've ever kept a jobs list, and maybe I'm wrong, but for me, jobs lists never gets to the end.
When you say jobs list, like
Like what to do list.
oh, like a to-do list. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, exactly. Like a to-do list never finishes. There's always the next thing, and then always the next thing, and always the next
Yeah.
thing.
And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do a to do list. That's like some people might say, "Oh, I don't want to do any to do list because of I've realized this." But actually,
No, you can do it. To-do list is good because it helps you, organize your life. But that doesn't mean that you cannot be happy with what you've done and what you've achieved at the same time as knowing that there's always more to do.
yeah, I think unless you're going to be a monk, there's a lot of virtue in accepting the things which we don't want to accept, such as if we're living in the real world, probably a jobs list is useful. Or a lot of this practical stuff is actually quite useful rather than being an enemy. If we're going to live in the real world, there's probably going to be lots of admin to do.
Hmm.
Sometimes more, sometimes less. But yeah, if we're living in the real world, but secretly hoping for or condemning ourselves for doing admin or whatever, then that's not very helpful. I think obviously if you find your whole life doing admin, then maybe that's time to rebalance. But yeah, I think it may be more beneficial to accept that admin is a part of everyday life for most people, and just to get on with it.
And even apart from the admin, even just as you said earlier, waiting to be happy until this is done or something else. There is people that
Mm.
say, "Oh, I'll be happy once I have a stable job." They get a stable job and then they say, "Oh, I'll be happy once I get the perfect home." Then they spend all their lives paying that the perfect home. Then they're like, "Oh, I'll be happy once I have children and the children leave the home. The kids grow up and the children leave the home. Yeah, then I'll be happy once I retire."
Yeah,
And then they're then it's retirement, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll be happy once I can be financially stable in retirement, and then you're dead. You're not happy. You're never happy.
Yeah, no, that's the great trick of life, which we're really tricking ourselves, I guess, or our conditioning is.
Or
Which is,
joy, or happiness is like obviously on quote unquote joy, as you said, even
yeah, and we can joke about that, but actually, that's the most tragic thing.
It is, because all of us a little bit we do that to ourselves. We're like, yeah, I'll be all good once I reach this milestone or this milestone or this milestone.
Yeah, we sort of maybe even dress it up in virtuous terms as this is my responsibility.
Yeah, my
Uh,
responsibility.
but then, really, are you just passing that mindset onto your children? And
Even worse, exactly.
if and if
And starting the
I think
cycle
Alan
anew.
Watts said something along the lines of, "Yeah, it's the most irresponsible thing to bet or gamble your life that you might be doing this hard work now, but in future, in 10 years, you might be happy." Like, do you really want to make that bet? You've trained your brain on 10 years of running on the treadmill. Are you really going to be able to get off for very long without feeling this is disorienting?
Falling apart, exactly.
Yeah, get straight back on it. But that's not to say, I think a lot of people, including myself, read Alan Watts wrong on this, and maybe Alan Watts believe this, I don't know. But to say that work is a bad thing, or it's unspiritual in some sense,
No.
I think it's there's something to be said in the quote. I'm not sure what the exact quote is, but the journey is of what's valued, not necessarily the goal. And like maybe the goals are useful sometimes, but the journey, and that sometimes the journey involves doing less sexy stuff, like just admin jobs, like checking your emails or whatever, or replying to that email, which until you do, you're not going to get peace, because your brain knows that that is the thing which needs to be done next. And if you're saying, "Oh, brain, come on, you need to be in peace right now," obviously, if you can't do email, that's practical. You just say, "No point reminding me, brain, that of something I can't do right now." But you have that conversation with your mind. You don't, yeah. But if you can do that thing, get that thing off your plate. Um, and like some people would say, do some your creative work in the morning or the first thing as you wake up. And I know a lot of authors do, but I would perhaps say that sometimes it's beneficial to get those jobs which are just nagging at you, which which your brain knows you need to do, and which probably often can be done quite quickly. Get those done, and then at least you have more of a clear head, hopefully,
But
and then you can create from a state which is more clear-headed.
that's a limiting belief. I'll challenge you back at what you're
Challenge,
telling me earlier.
challenge me. So what do you mean?
That
What do you
that
mean?
that you should do your more productive thing in the morning as your first thing. Your more productive thought might come to you right before you're ready to fall asleep.
Well,
Do
yeah,
it then.
I'm saying, yeah, do it. Where, like, get it off your plate, whether that's in the morning or the afternoon or the evening. Maybe don't start a project which is going to take an hour. If you're 11 o'clock at night, unless maybe you're a night owl. But even then, you want to get a good night's sleep. And if your job involves screens, then you probably don't want to be giving yourself too much blue light to get there. Yeah.
No, yeah, I understand what you mean, and I think going back to you said Alan Watts gets misquoted as saying work is bad. I think, especially these days, especially on social media, at least personally, I see quite a few videos that are against work. Like young people especially come into social media and say how horrible it is to work effectively,
Mm.
and I think I'm not saying that obviously that every job is hard. Every job has ups and downs. There's no one that does a perfect job. Otherwise, we don't want to do that job, I suppose. But it's also, I think we hear a lot of people talking very loudly about all the negatives of having to work.
Yeah, and that's probably why the hustle culture videos have become such a big thing, because they're the natural backlash to this. Obviously, they're ridiculous in some of what they say, but I think they are addressing something that even these young people complaining about work kind of acknowledge as sort of something which is perhaps true, in terms of there is an importance of work. And yeah, there's no society which is probably going to take all the need to work away. Maybe AI will, but that's going to come with probably bigger problems.
Mm.
And so yeah, like working, I think yeah, it's like Nietzsche says, he who has a why can forego any how. I don't know if I've said that correct, but yeah, like if, like for instance, going to the gym, lifting hard weights, if you have a why to do it, then it's not suffering, as some people might
Hmm.
call it. It's not like torture. It's something which is positive because of your attitude to it. Uh, and the trouble is with that quote is it demands a why,
Hmm.
and I think that's a hard question for people to answer in the 21st century, to be honest. And that's not to say there isn't necessarily an answer to it. Um, but I think people will often be not satisfied with the whys that previous generations. So
The whys as to why the previous generations, for example, like worked very hard to provide for their families and
mm,
kids and stuff. For example, I suppose.
yeah, I think yeah, if we really question that, and we might say, oh, but what's the point of working really hard to keep my family alive if I'm just going to produce a family of people who will themselves spend their whole lives working hard to keep their family alive, and so the chain continues. So you really have to postulate some reason beyond that for accentuating life. You can't just there's no point in accentuating life unless life itself is given
Mm.
or found to have some quality, which I think it probably does have. But um, it might be more fruitful to reframe Nietzsche's quote. Who am I to reframe Nietzsche's quote? But to say, uh, like, maybe it's easy to sum up in terms of good attitude. And even people with a bad attitude, I think, often understand what a good attitude is.
Mm.
Like, and yeah, like gratitude is a good attitude in some ways, but also just being very practical at times when you need to get a job done and not fantasizing about
Hmm.
oh, I wish this was different, or I wish something would come and save me. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's the problem with the religious mindset. And even if yeah, some people who aren't religious often, and perhaps even more people who aren't religious, have the belief that or the hope that oh, there's going to be a better world which will save me, or something will come and save me.
Mm.
But sometimes you just need to knuckle down and get through the jobs. Like the only way through overwhelm is sometimes just doing one thing at a time, and eventually you've got your head above water, and it's not always chaos as it felt like. And the ordering of chaos is a divine act. I don't know
Mm.
exactly what that means, but that's what Genesis is all about. Genesis 1 is the ordering of chaos. That's how creation works. And so we like, and maybe we'd say, oh, creation is something um, important, and we all wish we had more time to be creative, or we all wish we could be creative. But if you think of creation as making order from chaos, then all of us are creative or can be creative. And yeah, turning our jobs list into and just doing one thing at a time, and coming from that state of overwhelm to a state which is making progress, not necessarily all done, but you
Mm.
know that you're doing what you can. Um, and I think that's faith in a way, in terms of knowing that if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, even though sometimes it will seem stormy and sometimes it will feel um, sunny,
Mm.
you'll get through.
I think a lot of people are. A lot of grief comes from people being essentially very much disconnected from that feeling of creativity and that feeling of the job I do, like, is a job that isn't is nothing more than just producing value for people becoming richer in a way,
Yeah, yeah,
in the grand scheme of things. Like, in the past, people would do much more manual jobs that created something as a direct outcome of their physical labor, and therefore that made them feel much more connected to it, whether it was even for someone else's benefit, or someone, you know either creating something for, I don't know. Even I can imagine, even if someone was creating a palace for a king, they would still be happy that the pretty palace was built. If you were like the architect of the palace, or even if you were a worker for a giant palace, like,
mm.
I would feel, wow, I really helped build this giant castle. I would feel quite proud, even if it wasn't my castle, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'd be like, yeah, I built that castle. But I feel like nowadays we do jobs that are so disconnected just because they're one little part of a chain of like other little jobs that another 1,000 people are doing to kind of benefit a company or an organization, or the city that you live in, for example, maybe. But then you're still
Yeah.
doing something so small that it's insignificant compared to the actual things that are
Well,
happening.
I think that's the problem. If you question like your job too much, then you're always going to find that it's probably insignificant for most people's jobs.
That's the thing.
And you could say, for instance, for people building the pyramids, they might have felt they were insignificant. For instance, they were part of 1,000 people workforce, whatever. Don't know if it is, but they were part of a big workforce,
Yeah, but
and they had a very small part. But it's like a lot of philosophers, such as Meister Eckhart, would say, it's the how which is important. It's not the what we do, or how big an impact it has. It's the how we approach it. It's
I think that is an
and if
element
you
of it.
approach it with a good attitude, then it perhaps doesn't matter whether it's physical or not physical. I would say there is other benefits of working physically.
I
But
think, yes, I think there is an element to it, but I'll interrupt you. Sorry.
yeah,
I'll
go for it.
say I'll say that, like, nowadays we just press buttons on computer screens, which is very much like, and clicking our mouse on a screen, that I think takes away something. It just takes away something. I think it takes away
There
something from
might
the
be.
working in the real world. We work in buildings, in computers, for many jobs now, for a huge portion of the jobs, and I
Yeah,
think
but this might be
that
very short term and a very small blink in human history in terms
exactly.
of AI will take anything which is robotic because it just makes sense,
Yeah, and I
and
think
it
that
already can be done.
exactly, and I think that creates a difference for people. I think that's something very different, because you're not outside, you're not anywhere close to nature, you're not anywhere close to, like, obviously, I'm not saying that it's good to do manual things. I'm just saying that for a lot of people, I think that creates an internal, like, how to put it, like, schism inside them, of like, of this disassociation between what they're doing and any kind of real world kind of impact.
Mm, yeah, yeah, no, I see that.
Like,
I would say probably it is possible to have a good attitude towards anything, but it is easier to yeah, perhaps do it in certain careers, and perhaps the best thing to do is to yeah go into something which even if it's paid a bit less, you know it has some sort of real world results, and then just do that until you find something which is even better. Perhaps maybe you don't, but at least like whatever it is that you think, maybe you got a friend, maybe he's probably got the skill set which is slightly better for this career, but if you think that career is better, is going to be more fulfilling for you, if you think it's going to be something which you think you say, oh, that guy's actually producing real results, then you change to that career, and then maybe down the line you find there's something else which suits you better. But rather than just waiting in a career which doesn't fulfill you for years and maybe forever until you find a career which, or maybe you don't find a career which actually ticks all the boxes, then yeah, that's a way to waste the rest of your life.
yeah, I agree, and having, like, taking personal responsibility for changing your life is important. We were talking about this last week.
Yeah, and I
um
think yeah, like it's like a religious mindset. In some ways, it's to say surrender to God, or surrender and let go and see what happens. And there's great merit in that, but also it's up to you at the same time, which is
yeah,
a
God isn't going to find
interesting
you in your job.
paradox.
Like,
Well, he might do, but yeah, you have to also sometimes do the practical work yourself.
yeah, that's what
Um,
I mean, praying in
yeah,
your bed, God find me in your job, like, it's not gonna happen unless you get a CV and send it to someone.
yeah. Unless you're a monk, you can't pray all day. You have to you can pray or meditate in the morning or whatever for however long, 5 minutes or an hour, but for most of the day, you have to be putting one foot in front of the other. And
Mm.
that's not some Herculean task that we've been given. It's just like to have the faith or the good attitude to just keep taking the next step.
Mm.
And I think that's the paradox of the religious attitude is it's the faith in terms of the faith that if you orient your life towards the highest, as Jordan Peterson would say, although I'm not, obviously I've said the
I
problems
know,
with
I know.
talking of the highest in that sense, which may be also virtues of it. But yeah, orienting yourself towards the highest and going forwards, not in terms of imagining far off dreams or goals or whatever, but in terms of movement. And maybe it's no coincidence for the ancient philosophers saw that anything that moved had a soul in it.
Mm.
And so there's something towards in the fact that movement is valuable. And we in the West especially, we see meditation as something which is a solitary, still endeavor, or
Mm.
like physically still, but perhaps an equally important form of meditation is meditation while moving. So finding stillness while moving, which is the essence of qigong and yoga, and the whirling dervishes of Sufism, of
Mm.
and yeah, learning. And we spoke to Livia Cohn about this.
Mm. We
Flow
did, I remember.
and finding things, activities which allow you to flow and keep practice, maintaining that stillness while also moving. And the more we do that, we are able to bring that into our everyday lives.
Mm. I know. I can imagine for everyone who's listening to us, they'll be thinking, moving while being still. It sounds so oxymoron.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the spiritual stuff sounds oxymoron. Like Alan Watts will often bring up these sort of oxymorons,
Yeah.
and and then at the start of it, you're
What is he on
how are we going to
about? And
reconcile
then by
this?
the end, you're kind of convinced, though.
Yeah, because it's so practical. It's
Yeah.
often very real. It's not like he's done some sort of conjuring with his words and some spiritual magician or whatever. It's just he points out things which resonate because we sort of know them already.
In the first book of his, of Alan Watts, I was um, listening about out of your mind.
Mm.
I had this feeling every time he was starting on a topic. I was like, what is he on about? And then by the end, I was like, yeah, I kind of get it now. But I
Yeah,
couldn't really describe it back to you very
yeah,
well
yeah,
as without using his exact words. Like I wouldn't really be able to describe it back to you really
yeah.
on what he was saying about this kind of concepts. And it's as you said, this kind of oxymoron of like doing something both ways, like moving and being still. Like it's almost like you have to reaching reaching for your goal, but while also being grounded.
Mm.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much to say about that. Yeah, what's the positives and negatives of goals? Like, obviously they can be unrealistic. They can be set by societal conditioning. Like whether we really want them, whether they be really worth. Like, even if we want them, whether they be worth the sacrifice to get them.
Do we
How
even
far
really
off?
want them?
Yeah, and also, are they far off goals? Are they medium goals? Are they goals that we could get done in the next 10 minutes? Like, you could have a whole philosophical debate about each of those different types of goals, and some of them would have certain positives, and some of them have certain negatives, and yeah,
Hmm.
goals is just such a big word.
I know. Yeah. Goals maybe isn't there, but reaching for anything while also being grounded. Let's say. Yeah. Um.
Yeah, I think there is a pro. Maybe I would say you can't reach and also be grounded. Um, but you can go forward
Mm,
while still be grounded. So that's walking for you. To
mm,
give the analogy of a journey, you are still stepping each foot on the ground. You're grounded, but you're moving.
mm,
So yeah, like I think maybe you've got a goal in terms of a journey, and like you want to reach some place, but yeah, the everyday of it is you're putting one foot in the other and believing there is a place to reach,
Hmm.
or at least believing the journey of itself is of value.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I think that could be a very beneficial mindset for people to see it that way, for sure. Um, I lost track of where we kind of were earlier. I wanted to bring something up earlier, but then I kind of forgot about it when I was when we were discussing about the one of the previous topics that we kind of went into. But we always go somewhere. We always go somewhere with our discussions.
Yeah, I'm
So
amazed how many things we've touched on today.
yeah, quite a few different bits. I would say I wanted actually to bring up earlier. I don't think it was what I wanted to bring up, but I saw that the assisted dying bill here in the UK has been successfully passed in Parliament after MPs voted.
Hmm.
So it will become law. That
Yeah.
because we had discussed it in the past, I think a little
Hmm.
bit,
I think we did do one part of an episode on that.
where yeah, and I think I was looking at the comments on the BBC News earlier, and I would say most of them were quite in favor. Like the
Yeah,
majority of the comments, at least in the comment section, were super in favor
I
of.
think there is probably a majority for it.
It was very narrowly passed, I would say. The majority was not that big.
Mm.
Apparently, there was 314 fours to 991 against the law.
Mm.
So it was quite tight, but I think it's a step towards what the majority at least wants at the moment of the people.
Yeah, I guess it's a step towards a more liberal society in terms of liberal being individual freedom, not in terms of being left or right wing, which I'm generally probably in favour of. I would say I class myself as more liberal
Mm.
than anything else. Not necessarily left or right wing, but yeah, more liberal in terms of individual rights. Although I
Mm.
acknowledge that can often go wrong because we're imperfect human beings. But yeah, like a part of me does think that this could not be a good thing to pass. But I'm not sure if that's more of my emotional side or whether my emotional side has some wisdom to it, and I'm not exactly sure how to articulate it.
Mm. I mean, there is always the arguments of slippery slopes and you know
Yeah,
opening Pandora's box in a way. But I trust that we have uh, that we can implement a system where there will be safeguards through it. And from what I had seen, at least personally, from like the details about it, it would have to be two different doctors. That would have to be at two different times. The person has to have capacity. The person
mm,
has to have time to decide this. They would have to be terminal and have only 6 months to live and diagnosed with like prior to the decision being done, and only then it would be implemented. It's not like, oh, like I think people in these topics imagine that you're like in your bed, like half being able to speak, and someone takes your hand and signs on a paper while you're barely able to speak to anyone, and then they euthanize you. I
mm,
don't think, from what I have heard, I don't think that would be possible.
mm. So sometimes for people who might actually need it most, won't actually be able to
Yeah,
euthanize themselves.
yeah, and that will be, yeah, and in that case, yeah, I don't think you will be able to get it.
Interesting. Okay.
Because you'll have to be able to communicate that, you have to be able to decide that, and you have to be at the same time dying very soon.
Yeah.
So, but there's no, but in the same, but in with the same currency, it would prevent someone, forcing your hand to sign the signature, like on one evening next to your bed, kind of how
Yeah.
people imagine, like someone's relatives make you sign to die so they can get your inheritance or something. I think
Yeah.
this is what people are imagining when they're thinking
Yeah.
of assisted dying.
And not completely without merit. Like, I haven't looked into the safeguards, but I would, to play devil's advocate, and partly because I think there might be some truth in this, I will say that there will be some cases, even if it's only one or two, over the next 10, 100 years, where someone does, like an old person thinks, oh, there's no point in me being around anymore. I'm just going to be a cost financially and time wise and emotionally to myself and others. Let's just pull the plug now and give the inheritance to my children and let them have it. Like, and they'll be able to get through all the safeguards, and maybe rightly so. But
Mm.
that will happen, and it's just an extent to how often that happens,
Mm.
and whether that would be, yeah, still worth passing this law. But I even though it is an area of strong feeling, I don't really have a strong opinion on either side of this debate.
No, I wouldn't say I have super strong feelings, but I think it's good to have the option if you need it. I feel that's that's I'm of that opinion.
Well, you say it's good to have the option. Um, all of us only have one death, and whether it's in 1 minute or 15 years, it's still going to be one death. And the problem is that if we give people the ability to effectively choose when they die, which has a lot of positives, but also has negatives in terms of it. People might be not in quite that mindset, especially if they're ill. In terms of choosing or making that choice, like if you, yeah, there might be. We're presupposing, or someone who makes that choice is presupposing, perhaps, that there is nothing left valuable for life to teach them. And you might say, what's the point of learning something if you're just about to die anyway? That might be a valid point. But if you think of life in terms of something which is more about how you live rather than what you get from it, then a lesson learnt at the right end of life, or to die the right way, or to face that suffering as it is for however long it takes, there might be some virtue in that. And that's not to say there is, but it's just possible there is.
Mm. Yeah, but then again, it's up to to each individual person to choose if they want to experience that suffering or not. And it's maybe we're playing God in a sense, as you say, that we're intervening, but we play God with everything. With this sort of line of thought, you're playing God by giving someone antibiotic and not letting them die when they have
Yeah,
an infection. So I don't think that's a strong argument in my mind. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't do anything for anyone. And would say, yeah,
yeah,
maybe there's a lesson to be learned when you don't get antibiotics and then you get sepsis and then die. So it's difficult, but I can see where you're coming from in terms of like from a philosophical, not even a philosophical perspective, from a spiritual perspective, even to experience every aspect of life, even if it is that final aspect of pain and suffering before the end.
yeah, yeah. Like, I'm not necessarily convinced by that argument,
And
uh, but I'm not unconvinced by that argument as well. Like, and you could make the argument that if it depends what you weigh as more important. But if you think there's a possibility, even if it's only 20% of that pain or suffering may hold, it may be incredibly worthwhile in some way, which we may or may not completely comprehend. Then that would be worth taking a risk suffering for. but maybe not. Maybe not.
Mm.
It's
It's hard to tell. I think this is one of these kind of situations where you can never know until you are in that position. I
and even
think.
then,
And even then, you might not, exactly. And even then, you won't know. It will vary. You might say this now, or you might have said it might vary drastically
yeah.
based on you and your state then, and a thousand other factors. I see it as a net positive, personally.
I also see it as an inevitability, whether it's going to come this year or in 10 years or in 100 years. It does seem like the modern society or the society of the future will very likely have the ability for at least some people to be able to choose when they die.
Mm.
The warriors, that or potentially the warriors, with some there will be a slippery slope,
And yeah, someone else will choose for you instead every time.
or that you could just choose to euthanize yourself when you've had depression for 1 year.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course, of course. I think that is. I think there has been cases where I think people were saying places like Canada now there's mental health reasons where you can choose um, medically assisted dying.
Yeah, and you can make an argument that maybe that's morally okay, um, but also it does seem to throw up a lot of problems. And for instance, I'm sure there's lots of people who've got through depression and may have made that decision to euthanize themselves when they were in it.
Mm,
So we are perhaps bad at accounting what our future emotional possibilities or states might be when we're in another psychological state.
mm,
So for instance, when we're ill, it's very hard for well people to really empathize with how you're really feeling. Like when you got a really bad cold, even though well people have had colds before,
mm,
like we're quite bad at fully comprehending what those states are like, and vice versa. Yeah, like when you're ill, it can be really hard to comprehend what well is actually like because your whole
mm,
perspective is infused with this feeling of not
mm.
being well.
No,
And
I
the
swear,
same with depression as well.
I swear, I am the same. Like when I first when I get a cold or like I get a sore throat, I start reminiscing of all the times that I could swallow normally, and even just drinking a glass of water was so nice and so easy, and I start being grateful of all the times I had, and then the next day I don't have a sore throat and I forget about it and I forget how grateful I was.
Yeah,
And it's like, and I swear, as you said, it's like a completely different perspective that we kind of cannot we cannot put ourselves through in, even for other people, even though we've experienced it. It's like very rare unless you're currently in the moment of feeling it that way, and you're like, oh yeah, my sore throat is killing me and I can't even drink a glass of water. Like, unless you're in that state then and there's no way that you can empathize with that state of being at all.
yeah. As far as we can often go is just to have that mental conditioning to know that a cold equals bad,
Yeah.
but bad is just really a concept that we've got, a word which loosely ties to past experiences, but really it doesn't really have a feeling to it, and so we can't really empathize.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, we'll all be here later on when this law comes into effect for here in the UK and what happens. So we'll see what the future holds for us.
Yeah.
I just want to bring it up because we talked about it before, and I was saying earlier that this law had been passed now,
Hmm.
and I did believe it would pass, to be honest. So
Yeah, if
there
I
you
was
have it.
betting man, I would have bet it to pass. Yeah.
I would bet it would pass as well, with Labour being in power. If the Conservatives were in power and they had more seats, I think it might have not passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, one way or another.
Yeah, perhaps we should wrap up here. And
Yeah,
getting quite late, so
yeah,
might be a
we
good time
can
to call it.
we can wrap it up here. I am spent myself now, I think, and I think
Yeah.
I'm just my hay fever is still playing up. It's
Oh,
still
really?
playing up. Yeah,
Even
it's.
now, like you need
I
to go
have.
go and go and have a shower and wash all your clothes
I need
and
to
like,
wash
straighten
my
them out.
nose itself. Actually, I didn't do it earlier because I
Oh yeah.
didn't have. We went to Winchester and the trains were late. We had a huge delay and came back and it was 7 o'clock when I got back, and I have this kind of nasal douching thing, nasal rinsing um, thing that I do, and it gives me instant relief. But you can't use that unless you use it with bottled water or boiled water,
Mm,
and I cannot. And I have to wait until the water is cool to use it. If I boil the water, I hadn't boiled any water today.
What if you boil some water to halfway, so then pour some cold water on it?
It's not. It's the problem is the water is boiled, so you can disinfect the water. Otherwise,
Right.
you're in danger of putting like any bacteria straight in the back of your
All right. I've
of
kind of done that. I've kind
your
of just
sign.
poured tap water in the
You
past.
don't want to be doing
I did
that.
half hot water and some tap water,
You
and
don't want to be doing
it's
that.
fine. It's
Don't.
like this raw milk thing. It's like,
No,
yeah,
don't.
science says don't do that, but
Don't.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like
like
it's like
most of us do these things like every day, and we don't have any problems. But yeah,
we
obviously,
do,
like
but
I'm not
that one
saying that.
time you'll be end up in ICU. You know, it only takes one time for you to be in ICU. You don't need
Okay,
many times.
yeah, no, like I kind of acknowledge my point, but also acknowledge your point. Like they do, strangely seem to both be
Like
kind of right.
it's like obviously yes, you want to be taking the steps to kind of if possible to you don't want to be worrying all the time. But if there is things you can do, why take a necessary risk? That's all I'm saying. Like
Yeah, yeah, and now you said that, I might take that into account next time I
yeah.
do a
Like you
nasal
don't want to
rinse.
end up getting, an amoeba in your sinus that will end up getting you in ICU with sepsis.
Yeah, like well, yeah, like if I have some bottled water next time, then
Because
I'll
it's not
just
the
leave
same.
it.
Like if you're swimming, for example, like seawater getting your sinuses isn't a problem. For example, if you're in the sea, for example, or if you
Mm.
are, or even if you're like in a large body
But
of
if you
water.
add salt to your this with the boiled water plus the tap
Yeah,
water,
the salt isn't
then
bleach. It doesn't kill everything instantly.
the salt does not
No,
kill.
it's not. It doesn't
Uh,
work that way. It doesn't work that way. It's not blitz. Only blitz
then,
kills things instantly. The salt doesn't kill things instantly.
mm,
It's not. It's not. It's not blitz. Unless you're blitzing your nose, like Trump said, we should blitz ourselves back in COVID era.
mm,
Put blitz inside the body or something.
something like that.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. That was the only way. You can't do that.
Mm,
Like, so I didn't have that water though. I hadn't boiled the bloody water. I don't have any bottled water. So I put the kettle on and then I left it. And then I didn't actually like rinse my sinus. And it gives me instant relief. That
okay.
thing gives me instant relief from
Mm,
the itchiness in my nose. It's like, it's that thing that you can buy from the pharmacy. It's like this bottle and you only put that special like salt in it and you fill it up with the saline. It becomes saline effectively.
yeah.
So and then it gives me instant relief from all the itchiness.
So it's a neti pot.
It's like one of these squeegee bottles
Yeah.
that you just stick it in your sinus and then you let it drip down. So it's like
Did you find when you started using it, it didn't work properly in terms of it was because I think I found that if you didn't hold your head at the right angle and it drained down your throat or down
oh
the right
yeah,
hole,
you need to
then
do it. The technique is you lean forward on the sink and then you are with your head forwards and in one nostril and then out the other side effectively.
yeah,
That's what you need. And
yeah.
then
Sometimes, like I think, if you want to get the back of the throat,
but you
you
need
want
to
to.
at the same time like try and breathe at the same time because otherwise you'll end up swallowing loads of it.
Mm.
If you hold your breath, it will go all the way down the back of your throat, and you don't want to be going right to the back of your throat, ideally.
Well, I just to slightly counteract that. I would say sometimes you might want to go to the back of your throat if you want to target the area which is it the nasopharynx, which is the top of the pharynx.
That's
Uh,
not where the inflammation starts.
no, but
That's a
I would say
fallacy.
sometimes if you have like
If you're having
some
that itchiness, you mean at the back
yeah
of your
Well, if you have if you think that you have some bacterial or viral infection here, then
This
you
is just your
maybe
nerves activating. The
maybe.
sinuses is what you need to target. The
Mm.
sinuses are much
But
further at the
what if you have a
front.
sore throat, or if you have strep, was it streptococcus or strep throat? And I'm sure there's different variations of strep throat with different bacteria and maybe viruses.
I mean, it depends. It depends if that's different, because you could have, when we mean strep throat, it's usually your tonsils that are, for example, inflamed, and that's
Yeah,
something
so if your
different.
tonsils can get inflamed, and then maybe you can make the argument that putting salt on them helps. Maybe
Then
not.
you can
But
gargle. That's different. That's not going to
then
target the same
I'm
area.
saying, okay, there's tonsils, there's sinuses, but there could also be
There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
infected,
Trust me. There's nothing
infected.
there to
But
target.
there is flesh which could
There
get
is flesh,
infected.
but that's not the flesh that has the problem. This is just nerves radiating that feel that the nerve giving you a sense that it's there doesn't mean it's there in this case.
But what about post nasal drip, which has
From the if that comes from your sinuses, and the sinuses aren't back there.
right? So if you treat whatever in the sinuses, then eventually the post
Yes,
nasal drip will.
yes, we'll stop.
Okay, yeah,
Yes,
interesting.
this is yeah. Sometimes like for things like that, like our body is quite deceptive on where you feel things and where they actually are, especially
Mm,
when it comes to like the whole ENT
yeah,
area, um, because you have, as we said, like the tonsils are a different area that again it gives you a different feeling and inflammation back here, but it also can radiate. Obviously, you have the vagus nerve and all that. Um, then you have the sinuses, but the sinuses are effectively what causes the issue. And the sinuses are up here at the front, up
mm,
there, and at the front of our face,
yeah,
effectively. So, in the back of there, again, it might feel like this is there, but it's not there.
yeah,
It's so not there, you know? Um, and it's almost like kind of like a lot of people end up, you have cancer somewhere, and you know people don't, like, aren't in pain where the cancer is. They get like a nerve pain somewhere like in the back or something, and they
yeah.
have like a
That's
cancer that's growing
good.
like in the liver or
Yeah, and
something.
this is a principle, like I guess from what I know about Chinese medicine or yoga, and in terms of the fascias, like different areas of the body being connected to another area. So like I have no idea about it really, but say your big toe is connected to some
Yeah,
area in your back.
literally.
But this probably is like something medically to that. Not necessarily exactly what the yogis have said, but
Not
in terms
exactly,
of
but there is. Yeah, it often does happen. It has happened to people where they had like something happening, like a cancer growing somewhere, and they had like a weird itchiness somewhere in their body, unrelated, you know, completely.
mm,
But it was just like because some nerves were like trapped or pushed by the tumor, were radiating in another part of the body effectively.
yeah, yeah.
It's actually so true. That
Mhm.
does actually happen to people, and it's one of the ways that sometimes people say shocked. This was the first symptom I had. I had some itchiness randomly on my knee that wouldn't go away, and then I ended up getting an MRI, and it was like I had cancer. Actually, it's like what? But this is the body. It's very
Yeah,
very mysterious sometimes. You know, very
yeah,
mysterious. But no, be careful. Don't use the tap water like that in your. It's the same thing. The same reason why they say, oh yeah, don't wash your eyes if you're to do a proper, um, like an eye wash. They tell you use an eye wash solution, like
yeah.
special drops and stuff.
But
Don't
then
just use the
when I was
water.
a kid, I don't know. I always used to just do an eye wash as if it was just with tap water. Which, part of me wonders is all these products that people sell you. Like is the reason that
It's
people
it's
give this
again,
advice is partly because of all the products that
it,
people that are now there, which
I, it's
help
again
more.
a mitigation. Again, you're right to some extent, and I would argue yes, there has been cases where I've washed my eyes with like just tap water, but there is that once, even it might be once in a million scenario. But once in a million, you still wear your seatbelt. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. I think I agree with you. I would. Yeah, I'm also slightly sympathetic to the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. argument that of is it terrain theory rather than germ theory?
Oh
So
yeah, I think you've told me a little bit about that.
yeah, like how
Yeah,
like
yeah,
is it Louis Pasteur came up with germ theory, and then this lesser known French scientist who was a contemporary of Pasteur
mm,
came up with terrain theory and said that actually like diseases only really lock on to an unhealthy environment. So if your body is in an unhealthy environment, that's when you get disease.
mm,
So you obviously you can treat the germ. I guess no one disputes that, but it might be more fruitful or equally as useful to treat the underlying problem, which is your body's environment. And so I would say, yeah, I acknowledge that even perhaps healthy people could get ill from introducing a bacteria from tap water into their eyes. Um, Obviously, yeah, I wouldn't do that in India. And but yeah, like even in the UK, like I guess there's a chance. But also, I would say maybe there's some people who are more likely to be susceptible to that because of how yeah, the environment, their bodily environment. So the bacteria either doesn't lock in effectively, or it just passes through, or doesn't have so much of an effect on that person.
I mean, yes, I mean, we do know that if you're healthy, if you're fit, if you're healthy, fit, active, all that reduces your chances of getting something that will, even if you got like a serious infection, you're in a much better position to fight it than someone who is
But it's not just
unhealthy.
fighting it. It seems like,
Not
at
fighting
least
it. I
from my
mean,
non-medical point of view, it seems like you don't even get it.
well, you do
But
get it, but your immune system fights it without getting symptoms. Our immune
maybe,
system fights and kills things constantly. This is the
right.
misconception that
Yeah, I
people
think we often
people
think of fight as a struggle and that you'll feel that struggle, but actually, yeah,
people have that people
you
exactly.
firefight. Yeah.
People have that idea. People have that idea with COVID as well. That is like, oh yeah, I didn't even got COVID. People said, oh yeah, I didn't get COVID, didn't get COVID. And it's like you could have gotten COVID, but you didn't actually display signs of infection.
Well, yeah, that is certainly true, but I would say that's not necessarily proof of your argument. It could also be, but a lot of people just, for whatever reason, didn't get COVID.
No,
Like,
we no no no. We already know this from other infections. People get infected, the virus spreads inside them, but their body kills it, and they don't get any symptoms during that process
yeah, I
because the
expect that
battle is
will
effectively
be
in
right.
one-sided slaughter.
But yeah, yeah, but maybe to play devil's advocate, and I'm really not convinced of my point of view, but I want to play
Do
devil's
tell,
advocate.
throw it at me.
Um, but like, yeah, maybe some people just didn't get COVID. Like, I think that's a possibility. So they might have come in contact with the germs, but it didn't react to them. Like they didn't need to react to it. Maybe they didn't even need to firefight
Um,
against.
I
Uh,
think I think there were people. Yeah, I think there were people that. I mean, there has been the case. There is example. I'll give you another example, and that is also true. An example with HIV. There is a specific people, a specific not people. There is a group of people that have a very rare genetic mutation in their immune system. That effectively translates to them, to their immune cells. You know, the HIV virus comes and infects your immune cells, your immune system cells that effectively fight infections, and it kills them, and then it leaves you without immune system cells to fight anything else, and then you die. Because as soon as you get a cold, you just die then. But there was this group of people that they found that they effectively are born with this mutation in their immune system cells that means that the HIV virus cannot actually effectively attach on the cells and go in them and infect them. That can happen with other infections as well. And obviously,
okay.
millions of people in all over the world came into contact with different strains of virus. Not every strain of virus could have been able to go into every to infect every
Effectively,
person.
there's so many viruses.
Yeah,
Like I guess they're not as popular as bacteria, but as popular as bacteria. Maybe they are.
they are, but
Loads
it's
of
like
viruses. So, like, how come we're only affected by a very small sliver of them? And yeah, it does, like, obviously it's possible that everyone's got COVID, and like I've never had COVID as far as I can, as far as I've tested for it.
mm,
And I, if I was to get an antibody test, I would feel it's like it may show that I've never got COVID. I don't think it is. Antibody tests are accurate, maybe long term. So maybe
No, they're
maybe
not
one
long
2
term.
months.
You couldn't tell now if you have ever had COVID.
But,
Like you can
but
only
maybe,
tell when you
but
have.
yeah, I'm just doing maybe a theoretical. If there was
Yeah.
a test which went back 5 years to the start of COVID, I would be comfortable betting a little bit of money that I'd never been infected with COVID. Not obviously not a grand deal. That just shows my sort of feeling about it. I'm not sure, but
No, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. It's easy to say, to think, oh yeah. Like a lot of the things we do, might be over the top or we're worried for nothing and all that. And that can extend to a lot of other things, I suppose. But there are
maybe,
cases of fit and healthy people in ICUs, like,
yeah. And Spanish flu, I guess, is perhaps an example of that. Lots of young people dying
yeah,
after the First World War.
there's that. And I mean, every day, if you go to ICUs, there's so many people, like you can get all kinds of infections that can end up sending you to ICU.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and there's so many people that just don't make it in the end. And fit young and healthy people on paper.
yeah. Although part of you questions whether they were fully fit and healthy, like because it's very hard to perhaps sometimes tell like whether someone is fully fit and healthy.
Well,
Like just because you're thin and you do lots of exercise every day, or if you eat a relatively good diet, does not mean you have no underlying health conditions or whatever else that could be wrong,
that
whether
is
it's your
true.
fault or just nature.
That is true as well. But the you know by the observable metrics, people can still tell. Even when someone has an infection, doctors can tell if someone has been fit and healthy. Even if you have an even if you go to hospital now with an infection, even if you had COVID and it was severe COVID and you went to hospital, the doctors can tell if someone is fit and healthy or not fit and healthy by their observations and how their body reacts to the infection. This is what they class. Fit and healthy isn't an abstract concept that people say, oh, fit and healthy, just because the doctors, when you go to the hospital, don't look at you and say, oh, yeah, you seem like, they don't ask you how many times have you been going to the gym and stuff, what meals are you eating. They will judge you if you're fit and healthy based on your observations, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your um, if you're obviously been consuming things like alcohol or drugs or smoking and stuff like that. But they will judge you based on how your body has been reacting. This is a measurement medically of how doctors will judge someone if someone is fit and healthy, not just you know up like saying, oh, they've been living a good lifestyle. That like there's medically like medical standards of what's a healthy body is actually considered a healthy body,
Right. Okay.
and your blood tests, of course.
Mm.
Like, and still, these people who are on paper, they go into hospital and they're young, fit, and healthy, and they should be fine. They're still in ICUs, and they can still end up getting sepsis, and then they still end up dying.
Well, I also think yeah, mental health slash anxiety makes perhaps a bigger difference than a lot of people give it credit for. In terms of you could be completely fit and healthy, but if your anxiety or stress or depression is not good, then your survival rates are probably less, and you'll probably struggle to fight things more than if you
That's
were
true.
more psychologically healthy. And that goes to like a lot of yogis in India probably don't would fail a lot of factors on blood tests in terms of vitamin whatever levels.
Deficiencies.
Yeah, and but yet my thesis for it coming from a non
To tell.
biologically trained person is that perhaps they don't need so much because we only need those amounts of chemicals or vitamins. So because to deal with the stressful lifestyles that we have, and so yeah, that's obviously I'm not sure about that, but I think that's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I would say I understand, but I would think that's hard to quantify.
Yeah, and it probably depends on what types of vitamins. So some vitamins you might need more of if you're draining them because you're stressed all the time.
Mm.
Um, or maybe you can maybe this is just a theoretical example. Maybe you say you need more iron if you're rushing about all the time, doing stuff in your day. Whereas if you're chilled out all day, living as a yogi or living in a monastery, then you perhaps don't need such high iron levels or whatever metric it might be. But it might be another metric you do need certain levels of, whether you are rushing about all day or not.
Mm. Yeah.
But that's pure speculation.
I mean, yes, lifestyle definitely, as you say. There is a case to be made that a lot of our problems come from the lifestyle that we live in at the moment, like that people living unhealthy lifestyles. But
Yeah.
again, it's hard to quantify and analyze that. I think because if I think maybe there is some case to be made, but like if there were studies to show that, for example, um, the way we live in currently is causing X amount of people's lives, then things would change, I imagine. But we don't have as many studies, I would think, that would link the stresses of living in a Western world the way we live in necessarily cause us to kind of like burn out faster